here we are again, another season's gone. I'd like to thank all of you for your kind comments, letters, phone calls, etc. throughout the last season regarding Cracked It Volume 1. With Cracked It Volume 2 we've taken a slightly different angle to producing the film, and towards the end of this film I would like to answer all the queries and questions that came to me from Cracked It Volume 1, and I hope that I can cover as many of those points as possible. So here we go then, Cracked It Volume 2.
Liberation till 8:30 AM from Pickerville into a light and variable wind. The birds cleared well at the race point.
Well, you can see the pigeons are up at 8:30. Gets you going, doesn't it? I bet you miss it a lot. Won't be long before you're racing again, don't worry. Meanwhile, while the birds are on their way home, and by the way we'll be visiting this race intermittently throughout the film, and we'll see how the story unfolds with the birds within that race. But meanwhile we're going to pop over to Belgium now, to a very good friend of mine, a very, very good fancier, and we're going to have a little discussion with him and hear what he's got to say on various points about racing pigeons. I'll be back shortly.
First year when I started here in the year 91, I didn't have the money to afford at that time too many pigeons. I mean, I built immediately a nice loft because I thought by myself, I hope that I have a long life and I can raise the whole life with pigeons. That's why I constructed a loft like this. But I can tell you honestly, after it was, I think, 1 month before the first racing start, I got so nervous because I had 150 young birds and not enough money to pay the food. And I went very nervous on the loft and I killed half of them. But with the other half, I had on the loft only grills and V-perches, no boxes. I said to myself, that's everything that my pigeons get. The loft outside and inside the grills, that's everything. And all the rest you have to reserve by yourself. And then I started with these 70 or 75 birds left. No, excuse me, it were 300 birds and I killed the half, it were 150 birds.
Yes.
And the first Sunday that I started, I made the first prize and I won almost all the races and all the provincial races. So what I did, I put all these birds in the races, mostly only young birds. And then after the season, with the money that I won with these birds, I bought boxes, breeding boxes.
Yes.
And all the parents of these young birds, I put these on the stock loft because these young birds came from my friend, it was the old strain of my father-in-law. I put these young old birds, the parents of the good young birds, on the stock loft and some of the best young birds. And then the next year I started with the yearlings, and then again my widowers had no boxes. In the year 93 was the first year that I could afford the boxes for the widowers.
Yeah.
And in the year 93, starting from the World Championship, I won all the important championships, going from Golden Dove Award to World Champion, to all the magazines. I won everything from local, provincial, all the championships. I was of course motivated like my pigeons.
Yes.
Another thing what I did, because I didn't want to do the traditional thing, widowhood, keeping widowers and the hen in a separate loft the whole week. No, I raised total widowhood. Young bird, extremely hard, all the national races, knowing I preferred, even now I prefer to lose some more youngsters, but at the end I want to have the best, the strong ones.
Yes.
And the same what I did with yearlings and old birds, I raised total widowhood, hen and cock goes to the same race. And what you have not only a good stock loft, your racing loft is maybe your best breeding loft, because there I put my best racing hens with my best. For example, now while we are filming here, I was thinking about my super hen Utah, and I have also a super young cock direct from Kabila. I'm going to make them, it's in my mind already.
Yes.
Theoretic, they are the best together, I will put them together.
Yes.
And I'm looking already forward for next year to raise their youngsters immediately in the hard races. So that's a little bit the racing system that I did to go to know as soon as possible which are the good ones, to select as soon as possible, as hard as possible. This is my favorite young bird from this year, the year 2003. Her name is Utah, and Utah is a quite amazing hen. Later on in the video, you will see why she is in a second point very special, but in one point she is special, that in her racing result. She was this year in a race of Orleans, 435 kilometers, extremely hot. All the races were extremely hard this year. She was very early. The week after, a race from 546, she won the first provincial. She was the week after again in Bourges, 500 kilometers, again very early. The week after, again 360 kilometers. Then again Argenton 576. Then again La Souterraine 600 kilometers. And now, tomorrow, she will be basket again for a race of 600. But she's a real something special. Remember Utah.
It wasn't a silver spoon that was responsible for Josh's success in pigeon racing. It was damned hard work and determination. Josh is a very hard taskmaster with his pigeons from day one. They have to fly a race program as young birds, and some of them pigeons go on as yearlings to fly again from distances as far as Barcelona. His Poco Diego, as you'll see later in the film, is a classic example of that. The young hen, Josh has just spoken about Utah. If you add up the mileage that young hen flew over a consecutive period of 6 or 7 weeks, it's a phenomenal work rate. You know, you hear in England from various scribes in both books that 300 miles for a young bird is far too far. But I don't agree with that, and I don't think Josh does either. What he does is test the pigeon as early in their life as possible, and ends up with a champion pigeon that later in its life has become the champion it is, not just because it was genetically loaded, not just because of Joss's management, but also because of the experiences had in races in its earlier life. There is no substitute for experience. We're going to go over now to Joss's next question, which is about medication and how Joss maintains the health in his lofts, etc., and the rights and wrongs of that.
Yeah, I would say everyone has, of course, his method, and you know that okay, there are people which are racing fantastic and winning everything, and some guys are doing that okay on a pure health system or a health system with lots of medication. Okay, good. Myself, I have some rules in pigeon sport. I mean, to have a good result, I think you need a good loft. You have seen the loft. You have taken the video today from the loft. Good loft, good pigeons, and a perfect health system. And I try to have that combination. Good pigeons, maybe that's the first point. You try to get them, but then you have to breed them also. And then a selection. It's not when you breed 100. When I breed 100 birds, I have not 100 champions. My selection is so hard when I start racing them. At the end, when I have 5 or 10, I want to be correct on that point. I don't only breed champions, but I try to keep my level very high. I'm a perfectionist on that point also. It has to be perfect. The pigeon has to be perfect, it has to be good, it has to win, the performance has to be there. That point on the pigeons. Loft we said already. Then, briefly, the health system. I don't say that I don't give no medication, no, absolutely not. But what I try to do is, I try to build up the normal health of the bird with natural products. But I try to bring up the normal health with health products, with the good food. I can explain you later on what I did with that. But then on, what I do in summer, or I go to the vet and do an examination, not just a regular. The examination for canker and coccidium, I think that time is over. I mean, in summer, okay, you treat for canker when necessary. Coccidium, when you have a healthy loft and you give regular good vitamins, I don't think you might have a big problem with coccidium. Worms also, I mean, I didn't have a worm in the last 14 years, I must say, so excuse me. But coming back to that health, that regular health, what I mean, I go in the beginning of the season, I go to the vet, and he takes a swab. He takes a swab from the pigeon, and that goes to the university. And based on that swab, I get fantastic information. The university tells me, okay, Joss, you have a sickness, or not, but if you have a sickness, that's the sickness you have. And it's not the kind of a sickness like canker or coccidium. It's the new sickness, coli, streptococcus, all these kinds. I mean, it's too far away for me because I'm just a pigeon fancier. But I hear these new names, which are quite common at the moment. Okay, they tell you, okay, Joss, that's the sickness or the virus or whatever is on your bird. That's the medication which doesn't work anymore. And that's the medication which still works. And that's important. I mean, how often fanciers are not just giving just something, a product or something, and they don't know. I mean, is it, for example, suanovir or lincospectin or whatever, or doxycycline, but how many lofts have resistance on the, I hear it because of lots of examination which goes to university, and then they tell me how many people have a resistance for. People are talking about Bitril. Bitril is a fantastic product, but you give it when your birds are sick. And I think I have an advantage on that point. I give at the right moment the right medication.
That was a brilliant answer in my opinion by Joss regarding medication. The correct diagnosis of any ailment is fundamental in its treatment. Today, unfortunately, that can sometimes not be enough because the medications that are available may not work anymore. and this is a very important point that Josh has quite rightly made. In my next question to Josh, I expressed to him the problems us British fanciers have over here regarding veterinary services, etc. in pigeons. We don't have the situation where we have a qualified vet in pigeons like they do in Belgium, and our own vets that do specialise in pigeon racing treatments, of which there's probably about 5 or 6 at the most, have their hands tied with the medications available to them to use here because of the very strict rules provided by the VMD and the government. If a company abroad wants to launch a product basically in this country for any animal treatment, it has to be licensed, and invariably those licenses cost an absolute fortune, thousands and thousands of pounds, which is why we don't ever get to be able to use them, and neither do our vets. Now this obviously creates a situation where pigeon fanciers that go over to Belgium, like myself and various other pigeon fanciers throughout the country, are asked, can you get me this or can you get me that, please, because you as pigeon fanciers know what your pigeons require, and you may have got a box of whatever one year in particular and treat your pigeons with it and had a fantastic season, and then the following season you find it very difficult to get that treatment again, and your pigeons' performances are not as good. It's an area I feel we should be looking at quite seriously, along with the RPRA, perhaps as I've written before, in encouraging young British vets to go on some kind of scheme that could be set up with the right negotiation and the right impetus from various people, that we could then have vets in abundance that specialise in pigeon racing treatments. I told Josh about the situation of lack of vets here, and this is what he said.
I would say, okay, if you have to find that vet in Europe or I mean Europe, English, in Belgium or another country, follow it as advice. It's already, like I said before, you don't have to go anymore to a vet to know if your bird has canker or coccidium. I don't think that's the biggest problem. I think if you go on the system that I want and you want to have a further examination, it's simple. I mean, you can have the swabs and send them to the university. So also for an English venture, it's but I mean, you have to educate people for that. It's not good for the sport that too many people are going, and I can understand them, because I mean, the bird doesn't fly, what do I have to do? I give this, tomorrow that. That's not my way of doing, but I know lots of people are doing, and some have success with that, but it's their choice for that. I took another road to go.
Yeah, Josh is right when he says you need educating in that area. Swab testing pigeons and taking droppings from is quite a straightforward process. What you'll find to be true for you is, in a lot of cases, is when you use a British vet, even they will send the swab tests and sometimes the droppings over to Belgium to be put into a culture dish situation by the universities of Ghent, etc. Now you can send direct yourself using DHL, saving a few quid, and you can also get yourself a microscope and learn and teach yourself how to discover canker, cocci and worms within your pigeons, saving yourself money and time. We're now going to go over to Josh and ask him what I consider to be a quite important point, is where would he advise people to buy pigeons from, how to buy them and what to look for. Here's what Josh said.
Probably I will offend lots of English fanciers. I mean, I hear sometimes names in England from fanciers which, I mean, if I race against these people or if I race on that level, I don't want that. I mean, don't look too much at the names, look at performance. And if you go to a loft, don't take a loft which is going back. If Just Only goes backwards with results, please don't go to his place. Go to lofts where they are really, which you can trust and where the result is good. Just don't take names. I think at the moment in each loft you have good names. Well, of course, for example, now my best pigeons are Janssen line. But sorry, I think at the moment my Janssen blood is much better than in many other lofts where you have just a pure Janssen. It has to be a Janssen which performs.
Yes.
So my advice would be, please go to lofts which are, it doesn't have to be big names, no, lofts which perform well.
That's correct.
And try to take not only the bird, also the system.
Yes.
Because be careful, if you go to a loft or to a guy who has a health system with lots of medication, do not forget, when you are going to continue with these pigeons, you probably have to follow the same system, also based on lots of medication.
Yes.
So try to, but important is, when there's confidence, you can go for it.
There's an awful lot of truth in the point Josh just made regarding the medication that the fancier you've purchased pigeons from has used to enhance the performance of his pigeons. If you go back to Crack Tip Volume 1, I did say on that film that antibiotics in one sense could be considered performance enhancing. Perhaps that was not the right way to describe that. Perhaps it would have been better of me to have said that antibiotics could be described as health enhancing, which then obviously gives you an advantage. But what obviously Josh is saying is that pigeons that need to rely and do become reliant on antibiotics for their health will only pass that kind of constitution on into their offspring, and you, the purchaser of those pigeons, in the future will find that you will have to revert again to antibiotic use to maintain any substantial health in those pigeons. The ability of them pigeons to win is not in doubt, but the health and their constitution has always needed propping up with antibiotics. So consider that point quite seriously. I did ask Josh, of his many successful performances, which one gave him the most pleasure and was the most memorable to him, and quite modestly, to be truthful, Josh gave the following answer. And I say modestly because he could have very easily highlighted some of his fantastic performances to give himself a bigger G than he needed to. Here's what he said.
I must say, I mean, I have joy in everything. If I win on Sunday, I won the first prize. It's only 600 birds with young birds on 140 kilometers. I love that.
Yes.
This week I go with a race of 600, or I go to Barcelona. If I can win, I'm happy. I think I am a pigeon fancier. I love my pigeons, and I know some people are specialized, and I can understand them. I have the time, I have the possibility to go on all these races, so I have fun and all these things. Okay, winning a world champion title, I was 4 times the only one also in Belgian Pigeon Sport who won 4 times the world championship title, 2 times Golden Duif award. These are titles which you never, and also other people never will forget it. Like you said, 2 times the first yearling international in Barcelona. That's not just something, but I enjoy every winning, short or wide or young or old one. I try to go in all races.
You are a very competitive man in the sport of pigeons, and you get as much enjoyment from winning an ordinary race as you do a big one.
Yeah, and I also do it there. I mean, I have my middle distance line, which I really, it's for me a dream I achieve to have a fantastic middle distance line based on the Superman. But I also have a long distance line based on these 4 international Barcelona winners. I mean, do not forget, I had Poco Diego, first international yearlings, then Polanova, first international winner, then Gerda, first international, then Arnold, an egg which I gave to a fancier, first international. And these pigeons, I'm not the guy who goes in wintertime by left or right, no, I want to do it by myself. That, for me, that includes my pigeon sport. Breeding that pigeon, take him in the hand and see, this might be a good one. This might go on long distance, that one goes trying middle distance. I mean, that's for me also pigeon sport. Okay, I'm quite proud to show you the wing of this pigeon. It's the wing from Sumo. Sumo is at the moment a quite famous pigeon because he is the grandfather to the first international ducks in England. First time in English pigeon sport that a pigeon from Great Britain wins the first international. Sumo is also a top breeder in my loft. He himself won several first prizes. He is the father and grandfather to more than 25 winners. He is from the line of my Superman. Superman, which is a pure Janssen bird. You can see the blue color, and you can see he really looks also like the top birds at Janssen Arendong's After this checkup, I will bring the bird to Lanaken to a very special place, which later on the video they will show you what's going to happen there. Something really exclusive.
I asked Josh what he considered to be the reasons for so many young bird losses in young bird racing, which doesn't just apply to this country, by the way, applies to many countries throughout Europe. And this is what Josh's thoughts on that were.
I think that lots of the young bird disease and the loss of young birds have to do with something. If too many people keep on thinking that the only success in pigeon sport can achieve by giving lots of medication, that is very bad for the pigeon sport. I say again, medication at the right time. But what happens? By giving too much medication, which is probably not necessary, the immune system of the pigeons, especially young birds, gets down. And he gets infected very easily. I'm sure when you ask a vet or a scientific man, he must say that I'm right on that point. So what I try to do in my loft, and this may be important to say, I think you try to build up a good health system with your young birds, okay? And what I did, a big mistake with this medication and also with the food, and that's another aspect, that's the food. When young birds are weaned, very often, okay, they're given a food, a kind of food, a mixture, and then a few months later you are changing on light food because the birds don't want to train or this or that. And what I did a few years ago, I started with that. I went for myself and did a checkup by grains. I'm not a specialist, okay, but I thought I'd give it a try and made for myself, how do you say, a mixture which I thought which was good. And I went to buyers, to a company Budico, to several companies, but they gave me the best advice, and I asked them, what do you think about that? What I wanted is, I wanted to have one mixture for my birds that I think the changement, when you change that food, that infects also the young birds. So when I started that a few years ago, already the breeders, I gave them that one mixture. That's a mixture with all the grains, I put the list. And then they advised me, they said, just, I had for example 3 kinds of maize. And I said, just that one, that one not necessary, because that one is the best. So I said, I don't want to know the price. Give me an advice on using the best. So I made one mixture. I started giving that last year to my late breds. Only one mixture, always the same mixture. And I saw them developing like perfect birds. I had no time that they were really going. Sometimes the young birds go down. They stayed on that level. And I said, I'm going to do the same with my young birds this year. I had the best season of my life. I had races, you have seen that, with the first 9, with the first 20. Really top. And I think one of the big mistakes that we are making is the changement of the food. So I have one mixture, which I start giving them already in the nest box when they are at the breeders.
Yes.
Okay, and then I continue. And what I do with that mixture, when it's very cold in winter time, it's a mixture with all different kind of grains, the best grains. To be honest, the price is not more than another grain. I mean, I asked the best grains, but the price is not more. But okay, that's not so important. I made it for myself. Okay, the company brought it now. They asked me to bring it on the market. Okay, that's no problem for me. But I did it for myself to have better achievement. The stock birds, when it's very cold in winter time, I add 10 or 15% protein. Okay? And when even my widowers, I give it. But when I go on the hard races, I add because that was another advice that I got from the company. They said, Jos, don't put peeled grains inside, because they get, with humidity in summer, you might have bacterial infection on them. So no problem. What I do in summer, I get me fresh sunflower, I think these fresh peeled grains, and I add them only for the long distance in summer.
Yeah.
Now for malting, I add these wild seeds and these sweet seeds for the malt. So but everything based on one basic grain, and especially for the young birds, to give them not a change. Once if they are adult, I don't say you can, for hens for example, you have to go down and give them lighter food. I agree with that. But only when they are really growing up and ready for that.
Jos's answer here to this question regarding the feeding of young birds and the changing from one mixture to another, to be quite honest with you, I don't agree with. But that's not to say that he's wrong, because he has given you his opinion from his own experiences. And if you, for example, look at the way he's raced Utah, from 250 kilometres to over 600 kilometres for several weeks on the trot, I think his feeding regime to a degree could also be influenced by the amount of work he's asking of his young birds. But none the more for that, it's been successful for him, and that is the beauty of pigeon racing. Many roads, particularly with feeding, do lead to Rome. My final question to Jos was to do with performance enhancing drugs, and I asked Jos what advice he would give to those fanciers that believe that the only way to win is by their use. This is what Jos said.
If he keeps that in mind, I almost am 1% sure that will never be a champion. That will never be a champion.
Correct.
If he doesn't think about the quality of the bird in first instance, and the other things that I said, loft and the good management, will never be a champion. Never. He has to change his mind on that.
Yes.
But I agree, medication at the right time.
Yes. Thank you very much, Jos.
Welcome.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed what Jos had to say. For me, Jos represents one of the most innovative fanciers in Belgium today. And at the present rate of winning, he is probably destined to become one of Belgium's all-time greats. We're going to leave Jos now and go over to England, to the home of a very good friend of mine, Davy Hunt and Sons of Great Hanningbury in Essex. We'll visit Davy's home and we'll visit the lofts he races his pigeons to in Dagenham, the place he works. Davy's accomplishments in pigeons in just 3 seasons are astonishing, to say the least, and I'm sure you'll all be interested in what Davy has to say. So join me now with Davy at his home and lofts.
Right, this is a part of my business here. This is what you call wolf, actually in the docks of Dagenham. This is where my lofts are, and this is where I actually race pigeons at the moment, along with my young son Davy, who's just turned 16, and he's now working with me to spend now more time with the pigeons. He's a great athlete, fantastic footballer, had trials for West Ham, different clubs in London. He's also London champion boxer, and he also inherited the great passion and love of the pigeons, which you'll see later on in the video. He's got a great rapport, and I've often said at the young age he is, even now, he would hold his own in the pigeon sport with the best of them. I first got into pigeons as a very small lad, at the age of about 7, through my next door neighbour, Bert Tinley, who raced in the Custom House Club, living next door to me. I would peer through the fence and get a glimpse of them, get a glimpse of the pigeons whenever I could. I was fascinated from that very young age. My parents went on that year, God rest their souls, to build me a loft which was made out of household doors, and that was when I very first started to race at probably the age of 8. Through work commitments and in building my business, I've drifted in and out of the sport. I've moved from my previous address as a young boy to an house around the corner where I raced pigeons for probably 2 years with not the greatest success. I then went on and moved to Epping with great success, winning the London Off-Road Combine, breaking records and still holding many records today, which was well over a decade ago, which is in the North London Federation. I then moved to my present home and thought this was a great location to race pigeons, only to find that I was a little of 150 yards outside of the combine radius. I then decided, through my wife pointing me in that direction really, of racing pigeons here, which is the hotbed, without a doubt. This is Dagenham. This is probably considered to be the hotbed of the London Off-Road Combine. My family of pigeons are bought in Belgium from a man named Jan Grundler and also a guy named Felix Powell, along with 5 pairs of pigeons I brought from Ronnie Bigwood. Those pigeons are basically my foundation of my family, which are still winning today. That was probably 14 or 15 years ago.
Dave, what are your views on keeping your pigeons healthy? Please explain to the camera the products you use, supplementation, medication or whatever. How do you go about your regime of health in your lofts?
I'll pair up my pigeons late to most fanciers. I'll probably pair up later part of January. So around about January I'd start looking at the pigeons for health, because obviously you want your pigeons at that particular time to be healthy to pass on to the offspring. I would then at that stage call in a vet, and I'd, for no reason, not because I look at my pigeons, they don't look right, it would be a natural thing I would do at that particular time. I'd get in a vet, he would then look at the pigeons via a swabbing, drop-ins, etc. And then he would say to me they may have a touch of something or another. Then I would treat to that disease if there was one.
Do you use a British vet, Dave, or is your vet from Belgium?
My vet is a Belgian vet.
Would you just like to explain briefly your feeding regime, your ideas behind feeding, as we both know it's an art, and also have you any points of view on the major cause of young bird losses in the UK?
I have got my views. As you'll see, my loft is situated on a jetty, so I had to make a loft from limited space, and I had to put all the ingredients into that loft on the width of the jetty. You can't walk either side of my loft. You've got to control everything from inside on the downstairs floor, and upstairs I built a balcony. But I'd put an aviary on my young bird loft. I believe young birds, especially on the dark, have got to get as much natural sunlight as they possibly can, so there's not a better way, rather than leaving them all over the roofs, etc., is to leave them in an aviary. I only breed a small amount of pigeons from top quality. You know, a chosen pair which have produced previous, and I can more or less guarantee these pigeons. So I haven't got loads of space, I haven't got loads of time, and I'll breed about 30 to 35 young uns. And most seasons I'll end up with 20 to 25. So that loss of young birds doesn't really affect me, but I know it's a problem throughout the country. I believe that the loss of young birds is through internal illness. I believe that the internal illness at this precise moment, and has probably been around for 5 years, is paratyphus. I believe it attacks the nervous system, the brain, the ability of the pigeon in homing. It attacks a lot of the pigeon, but from the eye looking out you can't detect this. They look perfectly well, and you may see them stare into space on the odd occasions or just twitch as though they're looking at something. But paratyphus, I believe, is the reason for the loss of pigeons.
Do you take precautions against paratyphus? Do you use a new injection vaccine from Belgium, preempted by a 10-day course of antibiotics with your pigeons today, Dave?
Yes. I will treat my old birds, as I said, in January through the vet before pairing up, and then maybe 3 months before racing I will treat for paratyphus along with paramyxo for young bird racing. I believe this. I let my pigeons build up immunity for many years, and last year I never done it. I won 12 first federations in 5 entries in amalgamations. I was once first, 4 times second, plus several other positions. I'd also won the London North Road Combine twice. That in itself is a marvellous achievement. And I thought I was too clever in leaving my pigeons to build up immunity. And they never. They fell at the final hurdle. And I believe it's probably set me back a year or two, because this is how severe the diseases are. Cross-contamination in baskets, buying from one loft, putting into another, high immunity in one loft, low immunity in the other, crossing diseases. And at the end of the day, I believe it's that important that I would always treat now, always, young birds.
Against paratyphus?
Paratyphus.
When, or if you was going to introduce pigeons into your already successful family of pigeons, Dave, would there be anything in particular you would look for when choosing the pigeon? Would it just be solely on performance? Would it be the fancier himself that you study? Do you take into consideration his loft position, for example? Do you take into consideration how many birds he sends? Bloodlines of his pigeons, would they go well with your own type of pigeon? Could you explain, please, the kind of pigeon you would go after to introduce into your family?
Boy, that is a variety of a question. Yes, I would look at the loft position. I would look at the amount of pigeons he sends. I would look at, was he winning years ago? But mostly, the most important aspect, is he winning today? I would want to look at winning pigeons today. That's the sort of pigeons I would want to introduce to my pigeons, which are winning today. This is the 3rd season I've raced. I've probably had here 60 races. I've won over 30 first federations. I've won 3 London North Road Combines. I've won amalgamations. I've won everything there is possibly to win in the 3 seasons I've been here. I've also took the first 10, 8, 6 in federations and in open races, and only, which you'll see, with racing 15 Woodward cocks and racing about 25 young birds. So we have 5 cocks, 4 cocks, 4 cocks, a total of 13 cocks, with 6 or 7 young cocks coming up to make our section 18, 20 pigeons. That's all we ever raced. The most Woodward cocks I've ever raced is 18. I think 18 of top quality, plenty of airspace, plenty of loft space, will, with top quality, is more than enough.
You're a very wealthy man, Dave, and obviously I know that you're a fearless purchaser of pigeons, having spent thousands and thousands of pounds on pigeons over the years, and in the main you've been very successful with your choices. Would you say there are pigeons that are fantastic performance pigeons but have got no ability to reproduce in the stock pen?
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt.
And I also know, Dave, that you have a theory that you study,
yes,
which is the throat theory, that you use very successfully in your selection,
yes,
of the performance pigeon.
Yes.
Obviously it's very difficult to explain that without actually showing the viewer the pigeon and the thing, but how, on a percentage basis, how successful would you say the throat theory really is regarding selecting?
I'll tell you how successful I think the throat theory is. I actually inherited this from a very, very good friend of mine, Mr. Roy Calder. He phoned me up one day and said, Dave, you're flying an outstanding pigeon. Would you mind if I come over and looked at your pigeons? I'd known this man as a young boy, and he was once the greatest flyer, in my opinion, in London. So I was very delighted to speak to this man on the phone, and I arranged for him to come and visit my pigeons. And I'd heard this man was a very good judge. And I said to him, I've got 40 stock pigeons. I only have a very small amount of pigeons, which you'll see at a later date. And he went down with my son, who was, my boy's 16 at the time, he was about 10 at the time, and he took him to the stock loft, and I was in the middle of making some phone calls, and I was about to join him, and I said, get the best pigeons which you feel and put them in one section. And he said, okay, Davey, I'll do this. And he preempted on coming to do this. We'd spoken on the phone, and he said, I'll bring a light with me, I'll bring me loft jacket, and I'll come down and I'll look at your pigeons and I'll give you my honest opinion. And he done this, and to my amazement, in the 40 pigeons I had there, if I would have picked 20, he picked 18. He'd never seen the pigeons before, and it was on his theory. Now, I was astonished, and then I was intrigued, and then I got in deep conversation, and he's a very abrupt and honest, straightforward man, probably the straightest man you'll ever meet. And it was a theory he didn't want to educate me in, and we become friends, and he has educated me in that theory to a point, and I've picked up points on that myself. But I was absolutely amazed that he picked up 6 pigeons and put them in a basket. He said, one particular hen, which you'd be very familiar with, is Tia. And he said in his entire history of racing pigeons, it's the best hen he's ever seen. Now that pigeon is the great-great-grandmother to every champion pigeon I've ever produced. It's got the blood of that pigeon in. Now when he had said this, I had to now look and think, and not only did he pick one pigeon, but he actually all-marked them from 20 down to 18. And I couldn't have picked them out differently myself, and that's a fact. That is on the throat theory.
And I also would like for you to know, or if you could tell him for me, that he will kill pigeons unless, doesn't matter how they handle, what their eyes are like, feather, etc. If they haven't got the throat he's looking for, he discards them and kills them. Yeah. Could you just sort of come in?
People judge pigeons for different varieties: the eye, the shape, the balance, the wing. I like the pigeon to give you its wing. When we talk about muscle is great, but muscle tightens up and can work against you. Supple muscle is the great muscle to get. That's why, going off the subject, feeding is very important. How you feed your pigeons, to feed the muscle, to feed the body, in my opinion. Roy would look at a pigeon and disregard all that. He would like that if it had that plus the throat, but he would give all that away for the throat. Right. So that's how much he regards the throat theory. And at the end of the day, I don't regard it that as that. I would like to see the throat with a bonus of the other additive qualities in a pigeon. But Roy would disregard it. I've seen him go to people's lofts and say, I would kill that pigeon. And the man said, that's 10 times a winner. And he said it wouldn't house a perch in my loft. And genuinely meant it.
Are there any particular performances your pigeons have achieved for you that stand out above all others, or do you look at all wins in the same light?
This is an important question. It's a great question, because although I've had pigeons for 30 odd years, I've actually physically raised pigeons for no more than 10 or 12 years. So if you look at the performances I've done, they don't go over 3 decades, they go over 1. And on the first training toss of the first year, I get excited when my pigeons go away for the first training toss, young or old. There's a great buzz. That's what keeps us all in the sport. And winning at any level is a great achievement. And I've had some great success. I really have. I've had 25 pigeons, sending 25, arrive together and win the Fed. I've took 12 to an open race and took the first 12. on many occasions, you know, winning a fed with numbers of pigeons. I had a great race in the London North Road Combine with a pigeon called Davy Boy. 15 entries, 15 arrivals, first London North Road Combine, various other positions in the first 10, which was a record at that time. But the greatest performance I can say comes to mind was the performance of Sonny Boy, which was a Stonehaven race of 10 hours and 14 minutes. It was an achievement of, I've raced 13, 15 Woodward cocks, so I spend a lot of time and a lot of observation. I've got a great rapport with my pigeons, and there's a bond there. I'll get to know them, you know, I'll get to know what they're capable of doing, and I'll push them at that point. You know, when they show me signs and I know their capabilities, that's when I'll come in and I'll start pushing them. And this pigeon, he'd showed me, he's 6 times a fed winner, and he'd showed me 10 years previous I'd won the combine with a pigeon called Mays Way, after my mum, God rest her soul. And this pigeon would fly around as a team, and all of a sudden, bang up above them 3 or 4 feet. And I'd never seen this before, but this pigeon was doing it in exercise, building up to the combine, which we'd won. So 10 years later, Sonny Boy was doing the same, flying around and just banging up 3 or 4 foot above the others, and I was amazed. I thought, I've seen this done before. And he'd, on the 4 exercises that week building up to the combine, he'd done it on 3 occasions. And he was, you know, he was telling me, you know, I'm going to take a hell of a lot of beating here, you know. And I decided to, you know, have a little bet on him, which he'd do. He was my fancy pigeon. I only sent six entries, and I had 5 in the first 50 of the London North Road Combine, which was a real hard day. But he was 10 hours 14, and Roy Calder, as we talk about, he has difficulty in breathing, and he's out of pigeons now, but he comes 9 out of 10 races on a race day. You come and watch the pigeons arrive, and he's a great judge, you know, with his expertise over the years. He won't be far behind. If he say a pigeon to be 4 hours, you know, he'd be more often than not. People will say 3 3/4 hours, 3 1/4 hours, but he's more or less on, you know, he's on schedule, you know. And he said, this is going to be an hard day today, Davey, you know, south-southwest wind. He said, you know, your pigeons have got to be in top quality. And we'd gone through the conversation in picking them up, and, you know, when I'd spoke to him in the car, how I'd prepared them and how I'd fancied them, etc. And as we was looking, I said, here he comes. And he come right off the road like a train. And Stevie Medlock was there, along with Derek Scales. And as the pigeon, I run up the stairs, my boy had timed him in. He'd actually, they said he'd gone in like a UFO. He'd gone over the loft and just gone in backwards. And as I walked out and timed the pigeon in, now you've got to remember it's 10 hours, 14 minutes. And you're thinking you could be behind, you could be in front. It's an occasion, the phone don't ring, it's a long race, you know, sort of 380, 90 miles. Velocity was about 40 mile an hour. You could wind up with pigeons doing it a lot quicker. So at that particular time, you don't know. And as I timed him in, he looked as though he hadn't been round the corner. And I said to Roy Calder, I said, what do you think? He said, you've won the combine. He said, don't even think anything different. He said, the way that pigeon come, he said, trust me, you've won the combine. And that gave me great belief. I thought, oh, you know, he's not often wrong. And that was probably the best occasion in racing pigeons I've ever had, because I'd prepared him, sent a small team, and more or less, you know, I was more or less certain of him bringing great achievements home with him, which he did.
What would you say, Dave, to those fanciers that believe that the only way to win is by the use of performance-enhancing drugs? What do you say to those fanciers, i.e. they believe that you've used drugs, they believe that I use drugs, the likes of Josh Foner, etc.?
You've got to remember that the quality of the pigeon run, you can only build an house on foundations. And if your pigeons are of top quality, they wouldn't need drugs. And if your pigeons need drugs, it wouldn't enhance them to beat a pigeon without drugs of top quality. Drugs is, in society in general, is ruined the young kids today, etc., through the drug problems we've got on the streets. Any unprescribed drug is a problem, full stop. I can't reiterate that drug any kind of drugs in any shape or form would damage internally. You know, if you get an athlete, I still go and have a run. I'm 42. If I'd have abused myself, I wouldn't be able to sustain that in myself. And it's like a pigeon or in anything. You can't keep going to the well. One day it's going to be dry. And if you're drugging your pigeons, it's only going to be for a short period, finished. At the end of the day, there's no real reason why you would want to get a month of top performances from a pigeon when you can go and get 3, 4, maybe even 5 years and produce naturally, offspring alike, you know. That's how you build a foundation of top quality pigeons, through natural supplements.
Do you use any form of natural supplementation?
All my products are naturally supplemented. They're all natural products, but I would use them throughout the year to maintain the health I've already got. You can only build on the health if your pigeons are healthy. Supplements of any kind respond to health, so it's very important. You must diagnose a problem early and treat it. If there isn't a problem, all well and good. If there is a problem, then the supplements you give will respond.
Having seen both Josh Fonet's lofts and Davey Hunt's lofts, it's very difficult for you to gauge visually just how well those two lofts function. Obviously, the measure of that is the amount of performance and winning that both fanciers have accomplished. I'm quite proud of Dave's loft because I actually built it, and Dave spent an awful lot of time in discussion with myself in its design. Both Josh's loft and Dave's loft function virtually exactly the same. There's no air at the bottom of the loft coming in at all, and the only air that enters the loft is at the front under the apex. The air just dissolves out through the tiles naturally. No ventilation at either end of the apex. The difference between the two lofts, of course, is that Dave's loft is elevated and extremely exposed, as opposed to Josh's that is a little bit lower to the ground. Plenty of volume of air above the boxes, and both lofts provide perfect environment for their inmates, a very, very important thing. With over 35 First Open Federation winners, 3 First Open Combine winners, First Amalgamation winners, and top Federation honours week in, week out, Davey Hunt and Sons' performances are phenomenal. He owns good pigeons, races them to a good loft, and has been well educated. In a short while, we're going to go and join the camera crew down on the English coast, south coast, and we're going to see how the race is progressing and exactly what has unfolded during the course of the event. We'll catch hopefully the early pigeons crossing the channel, and before we do, as I'm sure you won't want to miss this, if you'd like to press the pause button, go and grab yourself a cup of tea and some biscuits, and then fasten your seat belts. We'll give you that short break.